Kyra, aka Ms. Wolf.
And I'm Mr. Michael, media literacy teacher.
Aka Mr. Michael.
AKA Mr. Michael. So here's my presentation we're going to show. Okay, so we're basically just going to walk you through a little bit of what's happening in media literacy from kindergarten up until 6th grade. So the first slide is, so in kindergarten what we're doing is we're just sort of introducing them to computers. So how to handle the computer, we tell them to treat it like a pet. We talk about how to hold the computer if they're holding it at all, which they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be walking around the room with the computer yet. It's a lot about fine motor skills. And then also, so this is a game called Fuzzbugs. So what they do with Fuzzbugs, they count and sort and use the colors to sort things, and it really helps with their little fingers that aren't quite ready for the touchpad yet. And then at the end of the year, we're doing online menus and chef bios for the kindergarten cafe, which they did last year, and they really they wrote a lot of sentences about themselves and then took a picture, which is really cool. They really like doing that. So it's just really getting them used to the computer and getting them acclimated to it. So then we have 1st grade, and 1st grade, it's still fine motor skills, but we're adding introduction to typing. And then at the end of the year, we're also doing a digital walking tour of the community. So students will go on a neighborhood walk and take photos and then record voiceover. So then in 2nd grade, it is how is the world mapped digitally? So we're looking at Google Earth. They just did this in 2nd grade. So they're looking at how data is collected, how it's presented, who's collecting the data, who's sharing the data, who's making our maps, and then who's in our online community. So we're talking about who we connect with online and offline, and how, if they're similar or dissimilar, how we can use technology to stay in touch with people we love that live far away. So that's like using Skype or email or FaceTime or whatever it is. And then at the end of the year, we're doing collaborative poetry. So it's based on the Brooklyn Bridge. We sort of give them topics, and then they create a poem using words that they come up with together in little groups. And it was really cool last year. We had some really cool poems. So then in 3rd grade, it's our big coding year. So we're doing a lot of coding this year. So it's using code.org, and the kids are starting to write algorithms for everyday tasks. They're going to be translating their names into binary code. They're going to create interactive games and stories, so at the end of the unit they'll have something to show for it. We're also going to be learning research skills, so they'll be looking how we can use multiple keywords, synonyms, alternative words and stuff to do really good Google searches for their research projects. And then at the end of the year, we're doing a travel log. So they'll have a country of study that they're working on, and they'll be finding pre-existing footage on YouTube, whether it's from movies, Hollywood movies that come out, commercials, anything, and they'll be taking that footage and putting it together to create a travel log for the country that they're studying. So it's basically editing with YouTube. So it's not really editing like hard, huge files. It's just sort of stuff that's online already, and that's going to be really cool. So then 4th grade, we start with how can we be responsible, safe, and respectful online. So it's a digital citizenship unit. So they're working on they created a digital citizen superhero, and the superhero sort of saves the day for online dilemmas that are happening. So they created a superhero, and now they are creating a comic. This is last year, and the comics were really awesome. They put themselves in the comics, they put pictures in the comics. It was really cool. And then we're talking about how we can solve digital dilemmas in a responsible way using this app, which is Comic Life. And then, so still with 4th grade, we're talking about how we can create a public service announcement to introduce settlers and colonists to the new world. So we're basically learning about what a PSA is. So that's raising awareness, changing public attitudes, and stuff like that. So then they're going to have to pick what kind of media would get the message across really well and how they want to use that media in their presentations. So then the last big thing in 4th grade is that you'll be hearing a lot about it. how can we recreate an explorer's journey to the new world in Minecraft? So last year, this is a ship that one of the groups made. It was really incredible. It's a STEM unit, so it has a connection to science, social studies, art. And Miss Nana and I are talking, so there's going to be an art project to do with this too, which is really cool. Students will use blueprints of the ship, so it's not that they're not just going and creating, they're actually looking at blueprints and recreating a ship. And so this ship actually had really detailed interiors, a kitchen, a place to store meat, a place for all the cabins. I mean, it was really incredible what they did in Minecraft. So it's not just the thing that they're going to play at home and kill people on. So there's stuff that they can actually build here. So then 5th grade. 5th grade, we are starting, so right now we actually are in our human rights unit. So we're doing a lot of social studies work, but we're looking at it from a media literacy perspective. So we're looking at a lot of media, photos, and we're questioning things like who took these photos? Why did they take these photos? What's been left out of the photo? What are we looking at and why are we looking at it? And how did it get to us here now in 2014? And they'll also be looking at how the information has been preserved over the years using digital archiving techniques. And that will lead us into creating their own digital digital archives to sort of archive things that are important to them in their life, so that in 100 years, kids can look at those archives from our kids. So then after that, we're going into a documentary film unit. So the main question is, how does what we watch influence who we are? So we talk a lot about what we're comfortable seeing, and we all have a different sort of comfort with what we can view, and the kids sort of have to figure out what are they comfortable looking at. We can't unsee images, so we need to make sure we know what we're doing when we go into anything. How do we read an image? And then the big question is, how do documentaries manipulate footage to activate our empathy? So footage, last year we watched a documentary and kids saw something that wasn't there at all. And what they saw was really there. They saw unrelated footage to a topic, and they sort of put it together because all of a sudden it was the same topic that they were thinking about. And it was really cool to see how those images manipulated them. And they were really sort of upset when they realized that it wasn't what they thought it was. So that was really cool. So then still with 5th grade, the last thing that they do is they create an action project. So it's sort of working with everything they did over the year with social studies and human rights and government. So this is from last year. A group, actually I think it's Donald's group, made a Help the Homeless website and Twitter and Google Plus account, and they were on social media trying to get people to donate to it was a fund, right, Donald? Yeah. Yeah, so they were actually trying to raise money for the homeless, and they did amazing work. So they could have done anything on the internet. They could also have made a documentary. They had really had every tool at their disposal to do whatever they wanted with for that project.
I have to tell you that a lot of kids, their idea was for their actual research, they wanted to email you all that you donate money to different causes. I was like, you know what? You've got to figure out a different way. You've got to appeal to the greater good for somebody else. So they were a little disappointed in that.
So then for moving on to 6th grade, so we just did this, and it's been really amazing. So how does your personality type determine your actions? So the kids took a Myers-Briggs personality test, which isn't totally accurate for kids, but it sort of gives us an idea of where they might fall, and it sort of gives them an idea where they might fall or what they might see themselves as. So we're looking at how understanding who you are, but also understanding how people perceive you. And we're also thinking about how does the environment influence our behavior. So are we going to act the same way in my classroom as you would in another classroom? And also, so we're using a video game. We used Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers, where each person with a different personality type took control of Mario, but they each had one action. So one moved left, one moved right, one jumped, one was a fireball. So each had a different task, but they had to communicate together to even move Mario. Some of the groups came up and did amazing work and actually beat the level in the first try. Others came up arguing, screaming. They didn't know what, they could not communicate and they could not get it done. So it was really interesting to see how the groups worked together, and each student in the room knew what personality type everyone was, so they were actually taking observations at what was happening and trying to figure out which personality types worked best together. So then what we're up to right now is what does reality-based mean? So we're talking sort of about reality TV. So this is how we're going to introduce Final Cut Pro, which is going to be a big part later in the year. So what we're doing is we're looking at a reality show that has 40 kids that are it's called Kid Nation. 40 kids are dropped into a ghost town for 40 days and expected to make it run and function. And it's basically Lord of the Flies, but as a reality show. And we're going to be taking the footage from that and editing it together to make people on the show look differently than they are. So there are teams on the show that are competing, and those teams, if they lost the challenge, there are going to be groups that edit them to win the challenge. There are going to be groups that edit different outcomes from all the same footage. So it's going to be sort of an introduction to Final Cut Pro. So we're looking at how the truth can be manipulated, and even the truth we have isn't even the truth. So we're actually manipulating another truth. Kyra's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in library, and then we're going to talk about a big project that we have. Oh wait, sorry, that's the last thing. So that's one of our characters who says, I'm a beauty queen, I don't do dishes. So that's just how she was sort of presented on the show, as this beauty queen type. Okay.
So I'm working with 5th and 6th grade this year in library, and right now we're in a humanities collaboration. So in library, they have independent time, they have time they're working in book clubs, and they also have time for projects later on. So we did the portfolios in library, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But what we're doing is we're focusing on the Common Core's idea of diverse media formats. So we have to be literate in multiple formats as readers today. How do we interact with digital text? When you're on a computer screen, when you're reading a book, you're usually reading from left to right and top to bottom. But when you're reading on the computer, there's a whole different way that you interact with the text. So we're looking at really complex digital text, like how do you read a rollover? How do you decide when to click on links? Things like that. We're right now in book clubs, and it's going to be leading into an audio cast project. So the idea of media literacy at BSI is we want kids to be responsible consumers of information, producers of information, and creators of information. So in creating, meaning we're actually creating the binary sometimes that Michael's doing with coding, okay? So that they can do it all for themselves. So the audiocast project is going to be really cool. The book clubs that they're working in, we're going to be looking at the different types of podcasts there are in the world. We're going to be critiquing them, and then we're going to be creating our own podcasts. I'm not going as fast as Michael. He's doing one slide. Gotta last a little while. All right, and then in 6th grade, we're doing the same, a similar thing. We're looking at it more through a social studies lens. So we're doing an early humans project that we're collaborating with Stephanie's class, and we're doing the same thing. We're looking at, how they have those, I'm sorry I don't have an example of it, a really complex digital timeline, and there's pop-ups everywhere. And so we're looking at how do you read a digital timeline like that? How do you interact with the information? And that is going to go into how do we show our own time, how do we create our own timelines. So there's timeline tools out there, My History, the Timeline Tool Project, and then you can also create timelines using Google Slides or Prezis. And what we found is that kids get so into making it look pretty that they have a hard time balancing that with the content information. So we're getting across that not only do we have to think about how we want stuff to look visually, because it's so it's like the icing when you're working with computers. The first project that we did this year, it was a health project, and I watched a group for 20 minutes rearrange things on a Prezi without talking about any of the content in their Prezi, and that's something that adults we can get hooked on too sometimes, So it's important to teach them early on that we're balancing the content with the visual. That's why I've got one slide. Yeah. And so we'll be creating a timeline. How do we show? How do we get the most information that we want, or how do we select the information that we want, right? And how do we put it in a digital format that everybody can understand? This other thing that we're talking about in library is digital citizenship, and that actually ties really well into our health curriculum. Kids these days have to make really healthy, informed choices. They also have to know that there's a digital footprint, and that the choices that they make, there's going to be a record of them, probably unlike when we were teens and preteens. So that comes in with things like sexting, that comes in with social media things, what to share online.
Selfies.
What?
Selfies.
Selfies, yes, selfies. When it's okay, or we already have kids that have social media accounts and they think nothing of the fact that they're not 13 yet. Michael does a thing with terms and conditions. No one reads the terms and conditions, but all of them say usually at Facebook you have to be 13, Instagram you have to be 13. So that's part of our curriculum. And then the Common Sense Media Project is just something I wanted to put up there. It's a great resource, I think, for educators and for parents. They're a group out of Vermont, and they do a lot of really great online resource things. And they have really like 2-minute clips for parents that aren't that tech savvy, and they've got other things that are really good for kids too, explaining different concepts to kids. So that's our digital citizenship and stuff, and that's also very much integrated into everything we do. We know that we're preparing our kids today for a world where like digital media and media literacy is going to be involved in everything they do. Portfolios is our other big project that we're really, really excited to get. It's a school-wide initiative. We've done it in 2nd grade, and this is the first time that we've done it throughout the whole school. So there were a few blips this fall when we put them out, and one of the things is digitizing the whole process is really hard. It went pretty smoothly, K-4, when they weren't digitized, and once we, it's just a huge process getting 60-something kids, to make sure their permissions are okay, to make sure that their things are in the right folders, to make sure their teachers are shared on. So we tackled that this time around, and in March we're going to be moving to a Google site so that each kid will have their own Google site with their portfolio embedded, and we have a template to include other things like extracurricular activities and interests and things like that. So when they do want to apply to high schools or middle schools, they'll have something that they can show their high schools and middle schools. It's going to be on their Google site, and it'll go with them. The Media Literacy Project, so the big project that we're really excited about, the VHS project. Well, first I'm going to talk about the confidentiality agreement. So in our work in media literacy, what's come up is students want to use their own tools. A lot of our students have iPhones, a lot of our students have really nice equipment at home. And what do we do as a school when a 6th grader says, I really want to do this project with you, Ms. Wolf, but I want to do it on my camera because my camera is so much better than your camera. Or, I like the tools on my camera better. So we have to teach our kids, what to do with what they're creating. So it's if they're creating something and they're using a piece of equipment, it's the school's piece. It's not their personal piece, and it's not something that they can share on social media. So if they take a picture in a project and it's a picture of someone picking their nose, that's not something that they can post on social media because there's ramifications. So we invited you guys, I think Donna posted on our blog, to have a conversation about the verbiage of this agreement. Because I've looked at a bunch of schools' agreements, and it's very kind of dense legalese. And how do we bring that to the kids in a way that they're not going to just sign it and not understand it, but how are they going to understand it? So we're going to probably be doing a Google Hangout, hopefully, with a few parents and talking. I think the sample is online of the agreement that we created, and we'd love your input, and we'd love to have a conversation about it. We'll get it out, hopefully, we're going to get this thing rolling by December, and we'll get it out by the new year so that, kids can use the equipment that they have access to, because it seems silly to limit it just to our classes, when we know that in reality, they're going home